I love your cat prints.
Thank you. Well, you know.
Are they your cats?
Well, yeah, they're stylized in that, you know, you get cats with all different kinds of colors. I do have like a couple of white cats, but they're odd-eyed. So, you know, here's your old white cat. And like over there, you see the orange cat that's on the, yeah. Now, in real life, that's Elizabeth, and she's a calico. But since I'm working with a solid shape, it's kind of hard to make Elizabeth be a calico if you want a solid color. So I either treat her as a black cat or an orange cat, you know. And there she is down in the lower one there. Yeah, she was trying to get a baby cardinal. And then over there, then the mother and father cardinal bombarded her until she had to give up. That's my hackberry tree.
Oh, how funny.
You know, that's where everything happens, in the backyard.
Oh, yeah.
No, you know, like, it's real funny. When I first, of course, I lived in Austin, and then I moved out to McDade. And the first thing that happened when I handed somebody my call card is, where is McDade? And I've gotten to the point where I hand a person my card, and then I say, 35 miles east of Austin. I do live in the small town, right on, you know, Maine and whatever, you know. And so you have the life of the town going on around you. And you can be, you know, you can go and talk to people and find out what's going on. It's when I was growing up, I grew up on a farm, and that was just out in the boondocks, you know. And so I do enjoy the fact that you
have neighbors.
I have neighbors. Come on in. This is my workshop, and I just wanted to walk around with you and kind of show you just what a workshop looks like for an artist. Over here you see my shelf that it has my silk screening inks that I use for printing. I also silk screen like Teresa. And this section of the shop is where I do my matting, mounting, and cellophaning of my artwork and framing of my artwork. And you can see kind of in the foreground my mat cutter and then my other mat cutter that I use. And then now you're coming into the section of the room where I am. Hi. And you can see here my inks that I'm using for doing my acrylic paintings, which is acrylic and ink paintings, which is what I'm going to work on today. Now, what I do in real life is a pen and ink drawing, and I'm going to show you how I do it. I always start on watercolor paper. I like the paper because it's nice and durable. You can do a lot of things with it. And I start with pencil and T-square and triangle, just nice old-fashioned things that I learned how to do when I was in art school. And what I decided I wanted to do today was my porch at my house here. I have a tendency to work an awful lot with the animals that I have in my yard and in my neighborhood. Now what I've done is I've gone and roughed out in the pencil pretty much where I want things. I don't know if you can see this. My cat is being a very nice help here for me today. I've kind of put a dog down here and a rabbit and a cat and put in the wood and everything the way I want it. I always start by drawing my border. I love to draw borders. I like to have everything contained. It's real easy. Not that I ever really finish anything by staying in the border, but it's just always nice to start with a border. And then I start with the animals that are up close. And I have a dog here looking over a hedge at a rabbit. The rabbit is very surprised. He was coming up to the house to see if he could get a hold of some of the carrots that are in the garden. And he came stalking around the corner thinking that there was nothing there, and he found, much to his chagrin, a big, fat dog. At this point, I'm pretty much done with my pen and ink. I've just got a few finished lines here to draw, and then I can start going on to working with my acrylic colors, which is always kind of fun. It's like working with a coloring book, and it's something I've always enjoyed doing, because this is the thought process, and now I just get to play. And yeah, this is kind of it. Let me just show it to you as it is right now. Most pieces that I do a bunch of them at a time, and I'll have what I call my blue day, where I go and I put in all the sky, and then the next day is my green day, and I put in all the grass, and that gives a balance to the piece of artwork. When I'm working on a single piece, I don't necessarily follow that rule. I mix up my whole palette, and then I begin where I want to begin, and color where I want to color. And I've chosen right now, I guess, to start with the tulips. I love tulips. They're kind of a universal flower shape. I know they're not necessarily a Texas flower. And then I kind of like a light color for the dogs. Kind of a buffy color. Buffy? Would that be a color? I don't think it's a color. Camel. And I have a lot of different kinds of brushes. Not different kinds, just different sizes. Each one will be kind of like for fine work, and then you use a medium one for bolder work or broader areas that you have to color. Yeah, this is kind of a camel color, or buff color. Most of the dogs in my neighborhood, I guess, are kind of this color. I think it's because they all have the same mothers and fathers. Okay, now we've taken our quantum leap into the finished piece of artwork, and I want you to see all the different little elements that are in my work. You can see the dog that we discussed earlier, and the rabbit, and here's our good old little tulips, and I decided I'd put a bee in. There's a lot of bugs around here in McDade, and I feel that they should be mentioned. And then on my picket fence is a good old happy cat. I don't know, I think that's my Elizabeth cat. And the cat's looking at a bird. This is a bluebird. And around here we have a lot of bluebirds, so I like to draw them. They usually hang around in fence lines. And then, of course, the proverbial squirrel. No house without a pecan tree would be complete without the squirrel helping to pick up all those pecans. And beautiful bright red tin roof, which I don't really have in real life, but I'd always love to own.
This is the house that we live in here in Beaukiss. It's about 80 years old now, I guess. We've lived here about 6 years. This is our studio. It was a house out at Copeland that we tore down and rebuilt here. This is my husband, Michael. He's a potter also. We both work here. And I guess today most of my work's going to be shown. Michael makes throne work. This is our dog, Woodrow. And let's go to work. Come on, Woody. This is where I do my work, and on this wall I have some of the sample colorants that I use. Lets me compare colors and see what I want to use. I also have some of the cutters that I use to cut through the clay and inlay it. And on this other side I have the molds that I use. This is a large plate mold. The clay will be placed over the top and form a plate. And here's a large bowl mold. These are bisque forms that have been thrown on a potter's wheel. This is the shape I'm going to make today, a large bowl. And the design I'm going to be using is this one. It's going to be a fish and a moon. And I usually work from some sort of sketch like this to give me an idea of what I want to do. Now I'm ready to work with the main part of the design. And I'll begin by cutting a template with one of my molds. This gives me an idea of just the basic area that is going to be covered. The next thing that I'm going to do is cut out the basic design, which is going to be the fish. Begin by making a cut. Clay. Then I'm cutting the fish out now. Think of this design as sort of a fish howling at the moon. This is the turquoise clay here, and I'm going to put this template from the black clay that I've just cut onto the turquoise and cut it out. And by this process, I'm actually inlaying the turquoise clay into the black clay. At this point, I'm going to use the cutter. This is a kind of a simple cookie cutter. I'm going to cut out a little mouth shape here so that, and I'm actually going to use the black clay here as a piece to inlay into so the fish has an open mouth. I've completed the inlaying part now. I've added the moon. It's a half moon. Made it by cutting a piece of the inlaid clay already. And now I'm ready to roll out the piece so that all of the different pieces blend together. I'm going to do this with the large rolling pin. After the initial rolling with the slab roller, I do the rest with hand rollers. Gives me a little bit more control to roll in different directions and get the pieces really put together well. I'm going to add some other decorative elements in a minute in the form of overlay. That will be the stars. I'm going to put the template over now just to kind of frame my piece up and get an idea of where I want to put the final stars. And to do that, I'm going to take just little dots of white and put them up here. These will be rolled in also, so that while they're overlaid, they also become part of the entire piece. The pattern appears on both sides of the clay, and it, as well as the bottom, throughout the whole piece, and it makes me feel that one should be aware of a whole piece of clay. It's not just a decorative surface or just the top, just the surface that you eat off of or view, but it's the whole piece. It's the sides and below and the bottom. So now I'm going to just lightly sketch on here the final shape and make sure that I compose my final piece how I want it to appear. And then I'll make the final cut. Using this as a template. I also use this mold for a large plate, but it just happens to be the right size for the bowl. Now, I'm going to flop this over. And very gently begin to form the bowl. Takes a little bit of encouraging the clay to form a curved shape from a flat shape. Now that it's all rather bowl shaped, I'm going to begin to compress it, and I do this with a paddle, a wooden paddle, and I'm going to put a small piece of cloth over the clay so that the paddle doesn't stick to it. You can see that this is just beginning to smooth it out. This will further compress the laminations and begin to give it a structural integrity that will make it keep this bowl shaped after it dries and is fired. I've completed the paddling and the shaping of the bowl at this point, and I'm ready to take it off of its mold. It's had a little time to set up and take on the shape of the mold. And so I'll put this bat on top of it and invert it. And take the mold out. So now the slab has taken on the shape of a bowl, and it's ready to set aside to dry until it's to a bone dry state. It may take around 8 hours depending on the weather. The bowl's now dry completely, and the next stage is to buff it down with this little scrubbing tool, and I do this step just to eliminate any of the color, the black color that might have gotten onto the turquoise or vice versa, and to smooth the edge down somewhat and just give it an overall smooth, even surface so that nothing detracts from the graphics that I want on the bowl. The next step then is to put in some details with underglaze. This is a turquoise underglaze that's going to appear the same color when it's fired as it does now. It's a nice dark turquoise color. And I'll be filling in some thin lines and other details on the bowl. Next, this will be ready for glazing. Since the colors are already established, I just cover the pieces with a clear glaze. Now we're at the yard behind the studio where the kilns are. This one is a gas kiln. It's fueled by propane, and it will reach about 2,400 degrees at the peak of the firing. That will take about 8 hours. The piece that I was working on earlier has been glazed with a clear glaze. The design is now obscured, but when the piece is fired, it will become a glossy clear glaze and be a nice hard surface that you can use with food or put in your oven, put in your dishwasher, and it will be a real functional surface. The piece will be loaded in here, and now we're ready to start firing. Since we don't have time to complete the 8-hour firing and about an 8-hour cool down, I have piece that will be finished. This is what the final bowl will look like. You can see the glossy finish and the colors. This is my finished work. Here's the bowl that I finished this afternoon. This work's available at galleries across the country and here in Austin at Clarksville Pottery. My husband and myself both sell through craft shows also in Texas and other states, mostly in Texas though.
Hi, I'm Gail Kincaid. I work at home, therefore we are in my home. This is my husband Gene and my daughter Laura. Say hi. Okay, I'll show you my studio now. This is my daughter's room, and this is the bedroom I use to do all my wax work. First thing I'm going to show you is some sketches and estimates and then some wax. When I do a commission or a piece for inventory, first I do a sketch, and this is a commission piece for a lady in Beaumont, and these are wedding bands for some friends in Corpus Christi. And these particular setups, I do sketches and estimates so that people have some idea of what they're looking at in terms of cost. For myself, I usually do something a little less complete because most of it's still in my head. After the sketches and everything's approved, if it's a commission or it's something I'm doing for myself, I start on the waxes. And these are some leaf earrings that I've already done in the gold, and this is the wax I'm working on. And basically what I do is just build it up till it looks good, and it's the size and the shape and the smoothness that I want. I add wax, I take away wax, just depending on what form I want. With the leaves, to make the little vein in the center, always add, take away till I get at the thickness and the size that I want. Okay, after I finished doing the wax as clean as I want it, then I add a sprue line, which is a big piece of wax. And what it does is act as a channel when the wax is ready to be cast into a ring to the piece itself. This is called a sprue plate, and you basically mount all of the pieces onto the sprue plate. The next step after finishing up the sprueing, where it's all nice and clean on the bottom, is to debubbleize. The pink liquid is debubbleizer. Good name. And you simply dip it in and shake off the excess. And what this is supposed to do is prevent any bubbles from forming on the wax when you invest it, and then as a result you hopefully don't get bubbles when you cast. This is a flask. You force the flask down over the sprue plate, and it basically seals itself. It's like a little rubber base there. You put paper around the top to form a collar, and then just use rubber band to seal this off. In my case, I always label my paper because when I'm doing more than one piece, I have to know which gold to put in which flask. Okay, now we're ready to go invest. Next step in the whole process is the investing. Too bad it's not money, but it's just plaster. Okay, you have to measure out according to how much it takes for each size flask. Okay, this is the investment, and basically it's like plaster of Paris, but different properties in terms of chemicals. You add water. This is a cooking class. Okay. And this is all based on a formula in terms of how much water goes with the investment and all that fun stuff. Okay. Put the water in first, then the investment, and mix it up. There. Okay. And it basically forms just a paste-like consistency, like muffin batter. A little dab more water. And the reason you actually put the bubbleizer on is to keep bubbles from forming on your wax. And then the investment process, you keep the bubbles from forming in your investment. Okay, this is very noisy. I don't know what this is going to do to your ears. This creates a vacuum, and all the bubbles rise to the top of the investment. And after the vacuum has pulled all the bubbles out, we pour the investment into the flask on top of the leaves that we just waxed. Don't have enough. This is why I do all this out in the garage and not in the house. Okay. And now we have to vacuum this one too to get the bubbles out. We're done with the investing. Basically all it is just plaster inside the little flask here, and we let this dry for a couple of hours. And when it's dry, we snap the base off, and what's left is your flask full of the investment with your wax model in it, and that goes into the kiln. This is the flask that we just invested, and now it's hardened. And what we do is pop the base off, and there is where we put all of the little wax wires into one spot. Okay, we have to clean the flask up so we can put it into the kiln. Okay, throw this away, and we clean off the excess. You don't want any more investment on here than possible because it can get mixed up with your gold sometimes. Okay, that's done. The kiln heats up to 300 degrees. This is called a wax tray. We put the wax tray in because it catches most of the wax as it melts. Put the flask in there, and what happens is as the kiln heats up, it stays at 500 for an hour. The wax melts out, slowly just melts out of the bottom. Take the tray back out. After most of the wax is melted out, put this back in with the crucible. This all heats up to 700 degrees, then 900 degrees, then 1350 degrees, and it holds at 1350 degrees for 2 hours. And during that time, all of the wax basically just burns up and it's gone. And then we're ready to cast. Okay, now that the kiln's been on for so long, it's almost up to temperature, and you can see how hot it is. There are 4 little flasks in there, and the crucible where you melt the gold, and it is up to 1400 degrees. Since it's been burning out for the required amount of time, now we'll just turn it off, let it slip back down to 1000 degrees, then we'll hold it there for 30 minutes, and then we'll be ready to cast. First thing we have to do is turn on the torch. Turn on the acetylene and the oxygen. Get the pressure up on the tanks. Okay. And then we wind up the machine. This is a centrifugal casting machine. It uses the force of the circle to actually do the casting. It flings the metal into the flask just because of the force of going around and around. All right, I get the flask out of the kiln. I have to understand I'm not used to talking through this process. Phooey. And this has been sitting, the kiln and all the contents have been sitting at 1000 degrees for about 30 minutes. I melt the metal. I just melt it enough to get it to the point where it's liquid, and ready to flow, and then I turn the torch off, get the flask out, which now has just empty space where those leaves were that we did before. And then I melt the metal again to go into it. Okay, that's melted. Now, get the flask out. All right. And see, there's just a little bitty hole where all the lines went up in the wax, and all the wax is burned away just like a candle. So now you just have empty space where the leaves were. A little more flux on there. And melt the gold again. All the little black flecks floating around is a settling waste. And it does get messy. Okay. And the gold gets to a nice little liquid puddle. And when it gets to that point, it's all melted and you're ready to cast. And by casting, we simply let loose of the arm and it flings the gold into the flask. Here goes. And you let that revolve until it quits. Sometimes stop it early. And then you let the flask cool off and get the gold out. And hopefully it casts into the leaves that we just waxed up earlier. Okay, the flask have cooled that we just cast. And what we're going to do now is drop them in this bucket of water. And what it does is it causes the investment to disintegrate around the metal and freeze up the metal. And you can listen to it bubble. Ah! That's because the metal in the flask are still so hot. Probably 500 degrees or more. This is the fun part. To dig it out. I love to dig it out because then it tells you whether or not it cast. If it didn't cast, you turn around and melt it down again. If it did cast, you're lucky and you get to finish it up. But the investment, which is the plaster-like material, is just, it just kind of comes apart now because it's lost all of its bonding since it's been heated so long. See? There are the leaves. Yay! This is what it looks like just after it's been cast. Still needs to be cleaned up and polished and finished up. See, you have all the imperfections. There's a big bubble there, a bunch of little bitty ones down there, which you don't always get when you do the debubbleizers and stuff. But that's all got to be ground off before you can do the polishing. Now we're ready to cut the sprue lines, which are these lines of gold, off of the leaf earrings. And these are the little wax wires that we attached to them before we invested. This is just a jeweler's saw, and you have different kinds of blades you can buy depending on how fine or how narrow you want your saw line to be. Okay, now we do the grinding, where we actually start the polishing and the finishing process. And we have all sorts of different little wheels and different little tools to use. The first thing I'm going to use is called a Mizzy wheel, and this is it's kind of like hard sandpaper. It grinds off, excuse me, it grinds off anything at a real high rate, and you have to be careful how much you actually take off. It also makes the metal extremely hot, so I wear the little rubber fingertips to protect my fingers. After finishing the pieces off with the Cratex, the pumice wheels, and various other polishing media, then we're ready to go to the actual polish. And these are some pieces that I've already finished all of my, oh, this isn't going to work, finished all of my polishing on and put the post on the back of the earrings. The first polish I use is a Tripoli. And these are just different media to get different shines. This one is takes out the biggest scratches, and then you go down the line and you take out smaller scratches with the rouge. This is the ultrasonic. The flask has a cleaning solution in it, and it's in the water, and you turn that on and it just zaps everything and gets all the polish and whatnot out of all the little crevices. And you take the Tripoli polish off, then you go to the rouge. Now we're at the rouge polish, and after this step and cleaning the polish off, the piece will be done, ready to be priced and delivered to your favorite gallery.
Hi, I'm Teresa Farr, and you're in my home, and at this desk is where I design the serigraphs that I do. Serigraphs are a stencil process where I'll put one color on at a time, and I'll be cutting a stencil that the ink will go through when I do the screening. The way I do it is, say I had a drawing of a triangle here, I would tape it down with my film over it, and then with the cutting tool I can trace right over the drawing. Well, the drawing, usually I'll do it first in pencil and then I'll do it in ink when I have it down really good, but this is just an idea. And the emulsion will peel right off like this. This way, when I put this stencil onto the screen, the ink will go through the place that I've cut away, and it won't go through the other part. Now I have a stencil that I've just completed cutting for the 5th color on this picture. You see, this is a lot more involved design than the simple triangle I had here. I have labeled all the different colors and where each color is going to go. This is all that the picture starts with. There isn't any original before the actual print. The only thing that comes before the finished picture is just this design with the line drawings all out and the color marked in where I'm going to put each color. Well, I've just about finished cutting the stencil for the 6th color on this picture. I think it's all ready to go now. This is a water-adhered film. It's called a cut film method. There's about 100 different ways to make your stencil. This is just one of them. And I think I'm about ready to go put the stencil on the screen now. Yeah, what I'm going to do with the silver ink is I'm putting silver on the little knobs on the kitchen shelves, and I'm putting silver around the stainless steel sink, and silver on the earrings, and some silver on this big wheels tricycle, and the shelves in the fridge, and just little places where it needs silver on the picture. And right now I'm going to adhere this stencil that I just cut, and I adhere it with water. Let me see, I need that board there ready. Plain tap water. I used to use a lacquer adhered stencil, but I had to adhere it with lacquer thinner, and that's got toluene in it, and there's just real bad fumes, and it probably would eventually kill you if you kept using lacquer adhered stencils. I'm just putting this under here to push it up tighter to the screen. And then real quick, I throw some newspaper on it. kind of press the water into the newspaper, the extra water. When I took the class at Laguna Gloria, Amato Pena was teaching it that semester. And now I just leave it here with a fan on it, and it'll take about a half hour to an hour to dry. Well, now I need to pull the plastic back off this stencil, and hopefully the stencil will stay on the screen and the backing will come off it. My latest technique on doing this is just to do it real fast. Comes a moment of truth when I pull the back of the stencil off, and hopefully the stencil will stay there. Good! The back came off without any pieces of stencil stuck to it, so it should be on. And now I'll check the registration, see if it's lined up properly. Ooh, it looks like. That looks okay. I think pretty much everything else would be okay. I think it could be a little bit more this way, and I've got that adjustment here. Areas to check. Yeah, that looks like it. Putting the ink on the screen. And now for the moment of truth. Let me flood it across here a couple of times. Recheck, make sure this is can't hardly see much difference, but now there's the silver ink, silver earrings, silver on the tricycle, silver on the trucks and the skateboard, and silver on the Tecate cans. And now it's just a process. It's going to take about an hour to I need some more ink on the screen. To pull all 80 of these through here. I can get 2 of these pictures on each shelf on the drying rack, so that'll give me, with 40 shelves on the drying rack, there'll be 80 pictures down in this edition. I need to stop every few pictures and check and make sure that the ink's going through in all the places it should, right? And that it's not going through places it shouldn't. Elsewise you wind up with 80 mistakes, just identical on each picture. Here you can see the serigraph completed color by color. The first color is a blend between pink and blue. The second color is gray. The third color is turquoise. The fourth color is orange. The fifth color is red. The sixth color is silver. The seventh color is light gray. The eighth color is green. The ninth color is pink. The 10th color is peach. The 11th color is black. Here's a selection of some of my finished silk screens. I'll read the titles to you. Tattersize. Armadillos with headphones. Flamingo wake-up service. Carrot raid. Night ride. PC cats. Bunnies in Carrot Land. Flamingo Drive. Lizard Mountain. Snake Dance. Wake Up Cat. Daydreams. The Green Baron. I sell my work around the state at arts and crafts shows. In the spring, I'm doing Fiesta at Laguna Gloria. In November, I'm doing Artist Harvest in the auditorium. In December, I'm at the Armadillo World headquarters, and I did the Pecan Street poster in '86.